Mameve Medwed is the author of 3 critically acclaimed novels, in addition to the one she's here to discuss this evening: Host Family, The End of an Era, and Male, which has been optioned for motion picture development with a screenplay by Wendy Wasserstein. Mameve is a longtime teacher of fiction writing. Her short stories, essays, and reviews have appeared in many publications, including Newsday, Red Book, Missouri Review, the Boston Globe, and Playgirl. Haven't said that up here before. Book Sense has named How Elizabeth Barrett Browning Saved My Life one of their top 20 picks, and it was chosen as the book club pick for March by Boston Magazine, and this lecture is being taped for our archives and the WGBH Forum Network. Thank you very much. Welcome, Mameve.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in this gorgeous, gorgeous place, and I'm very happy to see Elizabeth Barrett Browning over there. I was in London, and I have a postcard of a portrait of her. You probably can't see it, but she's not the beauty that she is in that idealized bust. But anyway, you can come up later, and I can show it to you. I'm going to read a little bit from the novel, not too long. When I read the first reading I did for this book, I did at the Porter Square bookstore in Cambridge. And usually I read from the book itself, and a friend of mine said, and then you keep moving around, and I marked it all up, and I had Post-its all over the book. And a friend of mine said, no, just print it up on the computer, and you don't lose your way. Plus, you can make very large font, and then you don't need your glasses. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. So I did that, and I made the font so big that I had a stack of papers this high, and I came to the bookstore, and I had the stack of papers, and I looked out at the audience, and they looked really chagrined. And I said, no, only 2 sentences on a page. So, and then I got this wonderful idea. Then I had these pages, and they were falling all over the place. So my husband actually bound the readings. But I'm going to read, I'm moving around a little bit in the novel, and I think it'll be clear to you what it's about. And then I'd love, hope, and pray for any questions. So can you hear me? Do I have the microphone in the right place and everything? Okay, well, I'm going to try without my glasses, but I may have to put them on. Okay, the beginning part is from the first chapter. It's mid-afternoon on a Monday, too quiet here at Objects of Desire, and too gloomy. The fluorescent tubes ringing my booth flicker and buzz, the shepherd and shepherdess lamps that flank the faux mantle, $1.29 a pair, 19th century English, a real bargain, lack bulbs. Their wiring is faulty. Clyde promised to fix it. He promised a lot of things. I look at the sign, A and C Collectibles. I should have painted over the C when Clyde ran off with that woman whose goods he appraised a month ago. But A Collectibles offends my grammarian soul. I met Clyde 2 years ago at the Brimfield Flea Market when our hands grabbed at the same time for a copper bed warmer stamped Plymouth, Mass. And on sale for a song. He tugged, I tugged, he wouldn't let go, neither would I. Within a month, that bed warmer was warming the wall in my Inman Square apartment over our shared Sealy Posturepedic, the way other couples might hang Chagall's birthday kiss, until we sold it for double what we paid for it. We rented the booth together at Objects of Desire, spent weekends and mornings trawling for treasure at flea markets and auctions in junk stores. Still, it's on low consumer Mondays like these that the quiet and the loneliness take their toll. I shift a bit to avoid the lumpy spring in the Victorian chair of ripped tapestry and arms that end in dragons' heads. Now I hear some scraping, furniture being moved, a carpet shifted from the booth next to me. A wall separates us. On Gus Robideau's side, the walls are covered in brocade. Anchored to them are gold sconces topped by fat, cavorting cupids whose dimpled fists clutch arrows. Why can't they shoot some of those arrows toward me? The sconces sell like hotcakes, anointed one of a kind. They are immediately replenished from an unending supply. People go big for cupids and cats and dogs, Gus has pointed out more times than I can count. You need to know your customers. No customers? Gus now feels the need to state the obvious. How you doing, Abby? He saunters into my booth. He leans his considerable weight against the faux mantle, but I don't say anything. If it cracks, it'll just give it more age. Always slow on Monday, I say. Gus points. How about moving that pot around so that the design's in the front, he suggests. Before I can answer, he leans over and turns an inch of rim against the wall. He straightens the fake fern I have put inside it. For starters, let's take this hideous fern out of this perfectly saleable pot. He picks up the fern, scoops out the styrofoam and pebble soil, and dumps it into the coal shuttle, first rescuing the page of the Times with the half-filled crossword puzzle. What's this? He asks. 4-letter lake in Africa, starts with M. He crumples the paper, he rubs the inside of the pot, looks closer, then spits into it. Gus, this isn't a cuspidor. He ignores me, he rubs harder, the paper squeaks. He taps the bottom. I mean, what's this? It's a chamber pot, I say. I know that, sighs Gus. He turns the pot upside down. It was my mother's, I explained, one of my mother's old things I brought in after Clyde left, to spip up our inventory. Nothing special, I add. Its provenance, Gus demands. Marked made in Portugal, which means, of course, it's not old. Don't be so sure. Gus is studying the chamber pot. He takes his pince-nez off. He puts them on. He turns the bowl over and around. Gus, you of all people know how things are antiqued for the tourist trade. He says. He sticks his face all the way in. I shudder, even though it's clean, and its purpose long obliterated by decades of indoor plumbing. There's some faint sketch of a dog here, Gus mumbles. I know, you can barely see it. A Cocker Spaniel, looks like, and a bit of writing seems to spell flush. A subsequent owner's idea of a joke, I say. He shakes his head, he flicks a couple of fingers against the side and makes a resounding ping. If I weren't an honest dealer, he begins. Come on. I remember when he showed me how to make new mirror glass black and smoky, to rub a table leg just so to exhibit age, to distress a clock face, to soak a white linen cloth in tea, not to mention those 19th century pairs of sconces, their cupids clutching arrows at the exact same angle while rolling off a 21st century assembly line somewhere in the third world. If I didn't like you so much, didn't feel sorry for you, that good-for-nothing just up and taking a powder with that decorator type. Yes, I ask. Abby, this doesn't say made in Portugal. It says from the Portuguese and seems to be scribbled in by hand, not a China maker's mark. So, come take a gander, he orders. I push myself up out of my chair. Gus is right. The blue letters, smudged and faded, spell out from the Portuguese. The porcelain is discolored from age and, well, you know from what. The design, blue and yellow flowers, seems sweet but uninteresting. Underneath the crude, faint drawing of a spaniel, I can indeed make out some scratched letters spelling flush. Funny how I hadn't noticed that before. Funny how I hadn't noticed lots of things. It's a mistake, I suggest. Someone who didn't have the benefit of English as a second language must have mixed up made with from. And later, probably a pet lover sketched his dog, no paper handy, then scratched in flush as a joke, being ironic, in place of the usual, please keep me clean so I won't tell what I have seen. Gus shakes his head. He sets the chamber pot back on the floor with an unexpected tenderness. Take it from me, he says. Isn't it already mine? I ask. I'm not joking, he says. Let me give you a piece of advice. I smile nicely, trying to hide my well-warranted distrust of Gus's advice. If I were you, I'd take this little old chamber pot onto Antiques Roadshow. I've got a connection to get you a ticket. I just have a feeling you might be harboring a treasure here. So then I move along. She takes the pot. Wait, let's see where I am. She takes the pot onto Antiques Roadshow, and she goes through the line, and she goes through all kinds of things. And finally, she's picked to see an appraiser. So I've got a little bit of this scene to read to you. I have left the green room for the production set. Lights blaze, cameras roll around on dollies. People in roadshow T-shirts and headsets run back and forth, checking, testing, adjusting mics. I am sitting across the table from the ceramics expert, Mort Greenspan, Stearns Auction House, his name tag states. He has kind eyes behind trifocals. He has graceful hands. His teeth are blindingly white. He wears a pinky ring with a coat of arms, his own, or one he picked up in an antique booth. The chamber pot lies between us. Under its concentrated beam of light on its lazy Susan altar, you can see its nicks and cracks, its faded flowers, its discolored surfaces, the tired lines and sags of use and age. It seems like a humble object, indeed, to be stage center, to be the focus of so much fuss. He leans toward me. Tell me, he asks, did you ever hear of Elizabeth Barrett Browning? I flinch. My chair legs skip back. What a question to ask an educated person from an academic family in Cambridge, even one who gets her Portugal and her Italy mixed up. Of course, I say, indignant. 19th century poet, married Robert Browning against her father's wishes, invalid, lived on Wimpole Street, I recite, fled to Italy, regained health, had a child, nicknamed Pen, died in her husband's arms. How's that? I want to ask, show off that I am. And of course wrote sonnets from the Portuguese, I continue. I freeze, I gasp. Fled to Italy, wrote sonnets from the Portuguese. Eureka, exclaims Mort. He actually claps. Atta girl, he cheers. I forget about the cameras. I forget that my makeup is sliding off my face. I forget the lugging and the climbing and the waiting in line. I forget my exhaustion. I forget my shame. I forget that I, a Ms. from way back, have been called a girl on national public television. My whole attention is riveted on this man across from me. Despite the cast of thousands hustling about, we are the only two in this room. His eyes behind their trifocals hold mine. They are watery with what? Emotion? Allergies? I lean forward so far into the table that the edge bruises my ribs. It's all I can do not to grab his wrists and pin him into a wrestler's hold. Yes, I demand. Well, he multisyllables. So, I prompt. Your chamber pot belonged to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. There's actually a photo of it glimpsed in her bedroom, half hidden by a coverlet, but unmistakable nevertheless, at Casa Guidi, where the Brownings made their Florence home. Mort Greenspan either has the patience of Job or a great sense of dramatic timing. He clears his throat. This chamber pot is valuable for many reasons. He holds up his hand. The coat of arms on his pinky ring gleams. When I look closer, I am disappointed to see it's not a coat of arms at all. No royal escutcheon, no clenched sheaves of wheat, no family name arched at the top. It's a Boston College shield embossed with class of 1956. No matter. Who knows better than I that a love of antiques and appreciation for English poetry can hardly be kept locked inside Ivy League gates? Though it is not valuable in and of itself, 19th century ironstone, Italian, a dime a dozen, a lira a dozen, that is, or should I say euro, he chuckles. Its value lies in the fact that, he ticks his fingers, one, it belonged to the Brownings, and we have the documentation, ergo photo to prove it. But that's not all. I nod, it sounds enough to me, but then I'm not greedy, or didn't think I was. 2, the bottom of this chamber pot bears the handwriting of Elizabeth herself from the Portuguese. So what can we conclude from this? You've got me, I shrug. That after a hard day of composing sonnets, she woke up in the middle of the night, had the idea for the title, and scratched it on the nearest item at hand. Which would have been the chamber pot? I fill in. I pause. She didn't have any paper available? I can't help myself. And I'm going to the last section. The horrible cad of a boyfriend, Clyde, who's disappeared, married for a year, has seen her on Antiques Roadshow, and he calls her a year after he left, and he wants to meet her. So they've arranged to meet. I get to the Pamplona early. It's warm enough that the tables are set up in the little courtyard. I order a gazpacho and a coffee ice cream parfait from one of the young, slim, white-shirted, black-trousered waiters who seem to have stayed the same since I was a kid, coming here with my parents for flan and almond syrup poured over ice. That's the trouble with living in a college town. Every 4 years, there's a fountain of new youth turnover while you do nothing but unfashionably age. A man at the next table is reading the Harvard Law Review. 2 women under the tree toward the back talk animatedly in a foreign language, Slavic maybe, or Hungarian. Typical Cambridge scene, which is destroyed when Clyde pulls up in his sleek, atypical Cambridge BMW, no residential parking permit marring its atypically bumper stickerless, atypically sparkling rear window glass. He parks right in front, wheels teetering on the curb in the no parking loading zone. "Abby," he exclaims. His prematurely tanned face is suffused with glee. His hair sparkles with mousse. He leans in toward my cheek. I smell too much cologne. I turn my head away. He backs off. He holds up his hands in an I surrender pose. You're right. No way should I have approached your personal space without your explicit permission." He points to the chair opposite. "May I?" he asks. Do I have a choice? I nod. "Great to see you," he says. "It's been a while." The waiter slinks by. A small Spanish flag sticks out of his lapel. "Let's see, I'll have a cappuccino, s'il vous plaît." He points to my bowl and a cup of that tomato soup. What did I ever see in him, I wonder? How could an antique bed warmer and the prospect of a warm body in bed, his body, have so blinded me? "Why did you want to meet me?" I ask. He reaches into his breast pocket. He pulls out a folded paper. His wedding ring, a thick gold band embossed with entwined hearts and a Celtic cross, catches the light. Some sort of rope bracelet clasped with an ankh circles one wrist. "I'm on a journey," he says. "To where?" "Not that kind," he says. He makes the embarrassing eye contact of a crazy man ordered by invisible voices to stare at you. Mine's a journey of self-evaluation, of self-discovery, of self-knowledge, of meditation, of contemplation, of spirituality, of redemption. He lowers his voice, of making amends. "Oh, yeah?" I say. His eyes look so tired from gluing themselves onto mine that I add more gently. "That's quite a list." "You don't know the half of it." He unfolds his sheet of paper. He sets it on the table. He smooths it out. Some of the gazpacho drips onto it. "I've written down all the ways I've wronged you. Believe me, I know them. I don't need to hear them. But I need to recite them. It's part of the plan." "What plan?" He lifts his spoon across to my coffee ice cream parfait. "Do you mind?" He excavates the whole scoop. A melting mustache smears across his upper lip. "According to my spiritual director, I must get back in touch with those I have wronged and make amends before I can reach the next level." "Of beatification? Are you planning to become a saint?" "It's not funny, Abby. I knew you wouldn't appreciate it." He stops himself. "Not that you haven't a God-given right to your personal opinion." That's a relief. Lately, ever since the twins, I've been doing a lot of meditation, been going on a lot of meditation retreats. Having twins must make you want to get away. "Not how you mean it. You don't have to be so sarcastic. Not that I don't have a right to be sarcastic," I fill in. In fact, the miracle of Etta and Rune's birth did just the opposite, propelled me into my personal journey of making amends. Remember, we are all our own people. We arrive in enlightenment as a matter of our own individual choice at our own time. I ignored the sermon. "So, I gather you've been on the road," I encourage. "Not totally. Some of my wrongees, if you will, high school friends, family back home, I had to email my amends. It was just too far, unfortunately. If it hadn't been for the twins, I would definitely have made the effort, though." His face turns serious. "Naturally, the recommended way to right wrongs is face-to-face, like us, like now." "I see. You sound skeptical. That's okay. Many people are at first, but when I'm done, you'll really see." I'm all ears. In that case, then, why don't I just get to the business at hand? Good idea. I order another coffee ice cream parfait. A girl needs her strength to face being amended to. Clyde clears his throat. In no particular order. You mean you don't go from the least to the worst? It's all relative. What I find the most egregious to the other person, it may, in the catalog of sins, be hardly worth mentioning. He looks at his watch. You have another wrongee scheduled after me? He nods. In Cambridge, near Porter Square. I just may be able to fit her in if I get through this fast. I don't tell him you can't hurry repentance. I don't exclaim another her in the city of my birth. Instead, I say, shoot. Clyde looks me in the eye. He studies his list. He looks me in the eye again. In no particular order, he repeats, here goes. I should never have grabbed that bed warmer. You got there first. You have first dibs. I apologize. I should never have moved into your apartment without paying my half of the rent. I apologize. I should never have complained about your cooking when I wasn't willing to do it myself. Ditto your cleaning, ditto your laundry and ironing, ditto the way you made the bed. I apologize. I should never have slept in our bed with somebody else. I apologize. I should never have borrowed and not returned and then subsequently sold some of your smaller, not jointly owned antiques. I apologize. I should never have fallen asleep those 2 times, well, maybe more, in the middle of sex. I apologize. I should never have been more attracted to your family background, your family's house, than I was to you. I apologize. I should never have bad-mouthed your antique acumen to other members of our profession and in the place of our business. I apologize. I should never have hidden away invitations to parties for the 2 of us and have gone myself. I apologize. He's really a cad. I should never have picked up other women at those parties. I apologize. I should never have thrown into the trash letters addressed to you from other men who weren't your relatives. I apologize. I should never have told you something looked good on you when it didn't. I apologize. I should never have complained about your small breasts. I apologize. I should never have forgotten to give you certain telephone messages. I apologize. I should never have joked about your mother's lesbian relationship behind your back. I apologize. I should never have lied that I read all of Ulysses. I apologize. I should never have implied to others that you inherited your mother's sexual proclivities. I apologize. I should never have pretended at restaurants that I left my credit card at home. I apologize. I hold up my hand. Stop, I start to yell. I've heard quite enough, but there's more. I get the gist. He checks his watch again. Well, maybe if I leave you the list, you can go over the rest. In fact, you can study the whole thing at your leisure and realize how humbly and profusely and honestly I need to apologize. I take the list. Its gazpacho drips looks as if someone has bled all over it, probably me. I'll save it for a rainy day. I'll save it for when I'm really depressed. All irony is lost on him. He looks relieved. He jumps up from the table. Behind us, a meter maid is slapping a ticket on his windshield. Thank you, he says. Thank you. So I'll be delighted for any questions. Yes. Excuse me? She's asking who paid the bill. Oh, of course she paid the bill. Of course. He'd left her with a check. Yes.
What is your writing technique? How do you put your thoughts down? Are you someone who works every day or sporadically?
The question is, what is my writing technique, and do I work every day or sporadically? I've taught writing for a long time, so I always tell my students to have wonderful habits and to write every day at the same time every day and not to miss a day. And I don't practice what I preach. I'm a complete slob. It takes me a long time to start something. So, I sit around sort of grinding my gears and cleaning my house and thinking. And I've realized, I used to feel just terrible about it, but I realized that a lot goes on for a writer in the unconscious and below the surface. So if you're in a writing zone, things are happening in your head, even though you can't intellectually get in touch with them, or at least this is what I tell myself to make myself feel better. So it takes me a very long time to get to work. So it takes me the whole day, and I start sometimes in the afternoon, and I try to write 2 pages a day. When I really have written quite a bit so that I have a sense that there's an end in sight, though I never know what the end is going to be, then I can work faster and longer. And the part I like the best is the revision. The part I find the hardest is just getting the story down on paper. But once I have it, I can work for hours and hours and hours, just making those sentences perfect. Yeah. No, it doesn't get easier. I don't feel like sort of practicing the piano or any other art that I learn very much, because every time I write something new, you start all over again from scratch, and I always feel that it's a complete fluke that I wrote what I wrote, and at the end of a book, I always have this sense of panic that, well, I got away with that, but I'm never going to be able to do it again. And then I managed to do it by some miracle. But I don't feel as if I've learned anything in the process of writing other novels, though I do feel that I have a little more confidence in my writing, in a sense that I do have some readers out there. Yes? It's the question is, how does the book change with the revision? In a first draft, I throw in absolutely everything, so it doesn't change so significantly, but it's a lot of pulling back, paring down and pulling back. 4 jokes, and I pick 1. And sometimes I realize I might need another chapter, or sometimes the character has to be layered a little more, or there has to be a little more context for some stuff. But usually by the time I finish a first draft, I have the arc of the story, I have the characters, and it's usually cleaning it up and pulling back rather than significant rewriting. It's because it takes me so long and I'm so slow in the first draft. I know I have other friends who just write first drafts very fast, and then they spend years significantly changing them. So everybody's got his or her own way of doing it. Yes?
This question is sort of like the leaps of faith of the book. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but her ending up with Browning's finger pot.
Yeah.
Going to the flea market up in Vermont or New Hampshire.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah. It's so interesting. You kind of get in a novel zone, and you've got a character, and you've got maybe a few themes and things you want to write about, and then you're open to all these things. So you're going around with a begging bowl, and people tell you stories. Or I went to a wedding in New Hampshire, and somebody told me this story about the king's arrow, just that it existed. So when you're in the zone, there's stuff that happens that you can use, and people tell you things, and you think, oh, that's going into the recipe. So that's one thing. The thing about her stopping short of Harvard one semester of graduation, I come from Maine originally, and I've been living in Cambridge since the 60s, and I'm an outsider, and I'm completely fascinated by it, and I wanted to write about the sort of black sheep of academic stars, or the failed children of people, for whom their parents had enormous expectations. So it seemed to me completely reasonable, given this particular character. She wouldn't finish Harvard. She'd have one semester left. She never finishes anything, this particular character. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. Yeah.
What in your background or your personal background or something that you knew prompted this particular book?
Well, I grew up in a house with a lot of stuff. My grandfather was an antiques dealer on my father's side. My parents were great collectors. We had a house in which nothing worked, but there was a lot of stuff. All the chair legs were broken, the doorknobs all fell off in your hands and stuff. But I was taken to flea markets and auctions at a very early age, so I always thought I wanted to write about stuff and possessions and the importance and the danger that they present. And then I used to talk about flea markets with my agent, and one day she sent me a vows column from the New York Times, and it was about a couple who had met at the Chelsea flea market when both of their hands reached across for a pasta bowl or something. So she said, well, here's your new novel, Tag Sale. And I thought, well, this is really great, but I want to write, about Cambridge, and I want to write about an object in contention. And for some reason, I came up with a chamber pot. I tried to spittoon and some other things, and the chamber pot sounded really funny. And then I had to decide who it should belong to. And I thought for a while Einstein or Gandhi, and for a while, for a while I thought Marie Antoinette, because I thought I could really have a lot of fun with hoop skirts and chamber pots and stuff. But for some reason, I kept coming back to Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and I think it was the juxtaposition of this frail poetess, and this very base object that struck my funny bone. And I knew the sonnets from the Portuguese, and I'd seen the Wimples of, the Barretts of Wimpole Street, but I didn't know very much else about Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and I went on to, my research. I used to call the reference desk of a library, but now I just went on to Google. And I Googled her, and the most amazing thing, and you probably all know this, but I found out, in fact, she had a dog named Flush, which I didn't know, and that she had famously written a poem to Flush My Dog, and that, in fact, Virginia Woolf had written the autobiography of Flush, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog. And I thought, well, chamber pot and Flush, it just had to be. It was just pure serendipity. And I felt as if, I'm sounding like Clyde here, but I felt as if some otherworldly spiritual thing was guiding my hand when I made that choice. So that was it. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, I don't teach anymore, but I taught for ages, probably 25 years, at that august institution, the Cambridge Center for Adult Education in Harvard Square. And I taught once at the Harvard Extension School and various places around. But I've recently stopped teaching. Writing full time, which means I never leave my house. I sit around in my pajamas. I never get to go out. It's very sad. And, yes.
Can you tell me some of the authors that you have read as a young woman that inspired you to become a writer?
Oh, well, I was a great reader, and of course, Little Women, Little Women, the Brontes. There were a whole series of books, and you probably have them. Do you have the Peterkin Papers? Does anybody know the Peterkin Papers? I don't even know who wrote them, but as a child I was completely entranced. And the Five Little Peppers and how they grew, and of course E.B. White, all the classic children's books. What was the Little Princess? All those girly books I read. And And they were wonderful, and I used to write horrible poems, and what I really used to do is when I was 7, I used to draw cartoons, and I sent them into the New Yorker, and I was completely astonished when they came back. I just thought they were so brilliant, and I thought, I'd done my work, and they were just going to take all of my cartoons and print them in the New Yorker, and of course they came back, and that never happened. And I was telling this story at a reading, and somebody said, and do you ever do those captions, in the back of the New Yorker, those captions of the cartoons? And I do them all the time, and I've never even been an honorable mention. So I'm glad I didn't continue on that career path. Anything else? Yeah. Yes, she asked me who are my favorite novelists. Well, mostly they're my friends, and they're local novelists who are wonderful. Eleanor Lippman, who's you probably know, who has a wonderful new book called My Latest Grievance. I love Tom Perrotta's books, Little Children, Election, which was you probably saw the movie Election, but the book is even better. I love Anita Shreve. My mind always goes blank. People always ask me this question, and I always think I should have of course, Jane Austen. Anybody who writes comedies of manners loves Jane Austen. I love Ann Tyler. I think she's wonderful. I love John Updike. Saul Bellow. We've got a lot of good writers around here. Yes.
What gave you the inspiration for such a vivid description
Of the cat?
of the cat?
Oh, the cat. I actually don't know this particular person, but my former editor had told me the story, had an old boyfriend who called him up on the phone and was in some kind of a 12-step program, and part of this 12-step program was calling people up and asking for their forgiveness, for all the ways they've been wrong. So I thought, this is the best thing in the whole world, and I took that ball and really went with that. Yeah. So that was a gift. That's what I mean about going around with your baking bowl, waiting for these stories. And so many of them a writer can use, so you all have to be careful around novelists. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. This is really good.